Okay, we're live. Yay, we did it. We
And
finally did it. Oh my goodness. Hello, everyone. Hello, anyone listening. Hello, Alexis. Welcome to the show. It's
hi.
another episode of Self-Care is My Job. And we have another awesome guest. So I'm always finding these amazing people to connect to. So I have Alexis McCloskey here with me. So she's going to tell us a little bit more about what she does and how she got to do what she's doing. So I'll let her do that. But I just want to thank you for joining me. So you're the Tough Love Coach on Instagram. And
Yeah.
I've been following you for quite some time. Your content is amazing. Definitely inspiring. And I'm just going to put it out there. Like, I kind of love how you toggle this line, at least in my opinion, you kind of like toggle this line between tough love, right? And then like, and just like, okay, get out of your own way. No more of the bullshit. Like, let's go
Yeah.
type of mentality. I love how you toggle that with more like, hold up, like, connect to your intuition and make sure that you're not burrowing through something that needs to be heard or seen or known, right?
Yeah.
So I just appreciate that very much about all that you do. So I'm just putting that out there, and that's why I wanted to connect with you. So here we are.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just would love to hear more about what you do, but also, yeah, what's your story? Like, how did this all happen for you?
Uh, yeah. So I'm definitely self-proclaimed tough love. I'm not for everybody, but I think that when it comes to either whether you're like running a business or you are just a person,
Yeah.
trying to make sure that you please everyone or everybody likes you is so exhausting. So I'm perfectly fine with being the person that I am on social media because my people connect with me, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So to give you a little background of me, I mean, my story has like so many different layers essentially, but I definitely wasn't planning on doing what I do now. I grew up in Delaware and like kind of in the Pennsylvania area, but Delaware is just super small. So it's kind of one of those, it's not even like a lot of people say I came from a small town. Like we're the small one of the smallest states. And so it's like an hour and a half to get to the top to the bottom. So everybody knows each other. It's definitely like you just know everyone and everybody dates everybody and everybody gets married and has kids and then stays there and never leaves. And so like I thought that was just going to be me. And it didn't happen that way. I essentially, went to college to be a high school history teacher, realized it wasn't what I wanted to do. And when I left, right before I graduated, I ended up starting to get in a relationship with this guy who at the time, if anybody's been through like a physically or emotionally abusive relationship, a lot of times you don't see it. And I didn't see it, but everybody else around me did. But I was just blinded by it. And so I graduated college, moved across the country because I was having kind of like a quarter life crisis from Pennsylvania all the way over to Washington State. And we had this like whole plan. We were going to like become actors and we were going to live in this like house and all these dreams that we essentially came up with. And we bought a car for like $1,000 off of Craigslist, drove it down the coast from Washington to LA. And when we got to LA, all these things that like he said he had planned for us like didn't exist. There was no house. So I ended up sleeping out of my car, essentially being homeless, not like on the streets homeless, but like in my car homeless for like 3 months, like showering in my bathing suit in the Santa Monica like beach showers, and just trying to figure my shit out because I had fought my family so hard that I was like, you don't know him. Like, I love
Mhm.
him, this and that. And then I was like, oh, they were right. And so I would like take pictures of Airbnb, like download pictures from Airbnb and like send them to my mom and pretend that I was taking pictures showing her that I lived in a house just because I didn't want her to worry about me. And so kind
Mhm.
of going through all of this, I ended up developing two eating disorders. I was struggling just like mentally, was depressed. I was suicidal. I was just not in a good place, but never once was I ever like the kind of person I am on social media today. Like I didn't know, like the idea of a self-help book. I was like, that's so like 90s. Who does that? You know what I mean? I was like, I know what I need to do. I just need to do it. And like, I just thought I could think my way out of what I was doing. And I was 100% the person that felt like it was only going to be good enough if I did it myself, no matter what I was doing, whether it was a career or my, my mental health. I was like a loner in terms of getting help. I didn't want to ask for help or anything like that. So in February of 2013, while I was living in LA, I finally kind of got back up on my feet. I ended up getting an apartment with like some people I met, and I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome. And so it was the first time in my life where I had anything wrong with me. It's not like a death sentence or anything. It can just cause infertility, weight gain, hair loss, like a bunch of different hormonal things. And that was kind of like the moment where I started to take my physical health seriously. Not my mental health just yet, but my physical health. And so I started using Instagram because I've been posting on Instagram since like it first came out, I think 2012, whenever that was. And so I just started posting like my food and not my workouts just yet because I wasn't comfortable with that, but I started posting like my food for accountability. And so as I started doing that, I ended up stumbling across IIN, which is the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and you can become a holistic health coach. And so not only do they teach you about how to help people with holistic health, but they also teach you like how to coach people and a little bit about the business side. And so I was like, okay, like this sounds cool. And I didn't like, oh, I was just doing like random jobs, like background work and like movies and TV shows. I wasn't doing anything like big. And so I was like, this would be cool to make this a thing. And so as I started to go through that, and kind of like throughout my journey from then up until now, I've slowly changed and molded my business to what it is today, because I still help people with holistic nutrition, but majority of what I'm helping people with is everything that I struggled with. The only thing the funny thing is because the people who make the best coaches are the ones that went through the shit, figured out the shit, and now can help other people do that in a way that, works for them. But the one thing that I don't never really struggle with, because my mom kind of instilled it in me to be okay with failure from the beginning, but it was perfectionism. But it's funny because I help so many people with perfectionism, but I think I just kind of knew from a young age to like lean into the fear of failure. And then I failed so much and I was kind of okay with it that I've learned how much trial and error works versus like trying to be perfect all the time. So it's really been just me working on myself and the kind of clients that or the kind of questions that I would get and the kind of things I would end up unknowingly, not unknowingly, what would be the right word? Like indirectly helping people with, that I was like, wow, I'm
Yeah.
really good at this. And so it wasn't that I didn't like nutrition anymore, but there was just some like, when you're a coach, the thing you have the most empathy for and what lights you up the most is really what you should help people with. And that's kind of where it led me to. So now I really kind of help people with like a combination of like life, mindset, and business coaching. I don't talk too much about the business side of it because when you join me, even if you're looking for help with like your social media, making more money, I'm really helping you like, okay, we can do that, but we're going to work on the mindset stuff first because we can give you the best social media marketing plan in the world. But if you don't have your limiting beliefs, your blocks out of the way, none of it's going to matter. So I kind of have like that combination of all three because I've been doing this for about 9 years. Yeah, a little bit more than 9 years because it was like the 9-year mark in March when I first really started doing all of this. So that's a little bit about my whole story, I guess.
Yeah. Wow. 9 years. That is really inspiring. It really, really is. Like that is, and the way in which like your business and your approach has morphed and changed, I think is a really important thing to note. So thank you for bringing that in. Like the fact that we're like all in this like constant like growth spiral, like, and it's going like your experience is going to dictate like what you have to offer going forward. So I
Yeah.
think a lot of us, because obviously I'm in the coaching world too, I'm in the first like couple years, and I still feel like my offering is constantly shifting because my experience is constantly shifting.
Mm.
I still focus on wanting to help moms if I can. And the reason for that is that the very beginning of my experience, having left corporate and like being a mom and trying to like figure myself out again, like reconnect to like all of the things that I used to want to do and couldn't do anymore, or that I hadn't even focused on because of just like my 10-year corporate career. Like And digging through all of that brings up a lot of shit. So in that, I'm realizing, holy shit, like there's tons of other moms that are dealing with the same shit that I am. Nobody's talking about it, at least at the time, right? Hopefully we get a little bit more vocal as time goes on. But yeah, like I love that. The fact that, yeah, it doesn't mean that you're locked in, right? And it's one of those things where you got to kind of let life like blossom a little bit. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I think you'd get bored if, not that you want to constantly change so much, but I think it's important to kind of like change up what you're doing in terms of either the way that you, like even me, I'm launching something on Monday that is one of the bigger things that I've ever launched. It still has to do with what I do with my one-on-one clients, but it's a little bit different. But like, and not that I'm getting bored with my one-on-one coaching, because I love one-on-one coaching, but it's just like you got to spice it up. Not only does it help your social media, but it helps you. It helps connect with different kinds of people. So I think it definitely is important to make sure that you're evolving.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Change is inevitable. And the thing is that especially with social media, based on, like how we're, how it's most beneficial to market ourselves in this industry, like that's always changing too. I feel like the focus and what people are looking for and what's going to end up in front of them and this and that is like constantly changing. It's hard to keep up with.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to evolve, right? If you're an online coach, you have to evolve. But anyway, so it's interesting to thank you for sharing, like, the good, the bad, the ugly, the fact that, and I'm always like constantly interviewing people on this show who are in like the wellness industry, or whether they're healing practitioners or whether they're coaches, whatever it is. And there's always a reason that you end up not only learning so much about one form of wellness or the other, like one form of bettering or improving yourself, or the other, and then wanting to share that, but also like going back, like this is what makes us want to help. I think like going through the fire and actually being like, oh, like I gleaned something from this, like I made it out the other end, and now I must share, right? Like I must attempt to, I always say, like, if I can cut the learning curve just a little bit for you, because it's sticky. And the thing is too, and I don't know if you find this when you're like dealing with potential clients, that so many people that I talk to think that they have to do all of this alone. Like you said, like you didn't have the issue with perfectionism, which I still hold my perfectionism and tightly, and try to nurture her as often as I can, because she's still very lonely and scared. But it is beautiful what you mentioned about having it be instilled in you at a relatively young age that it's okay to fail. I don't know that that's as many people, right? Like a lot of people learn quite the opposite, myself included.
Yeah.
So the fact that like you are able to actually share like from an integrated state, like what it actually feels like and what it looks like, you're actually can support somebody by showing them exactly what it looks like to do exactly that, to fail, to like, and then just like keep going.
I think it's there, at least in my experience over all these years of working with people, that like perfectionism is definitely one of the most common things. And I know that it's a rarity to have to essentially grow up and not have someone, because when I work with people in my program, my whole thing, like what I'm good at is helping. It's in my bio. Like I help people identify what's getting in the way of what they want. So instead of just saying, I'm procrastinating and we help you stop procrastinating, no, let's take 10 steps back. Why are you procrastinating? Oh, I'm struggling with, wanting my post to be perfect, or wanting me to be perfect in my job or my career. Okay, let's try to figure out how to stop being perfect. No. What's the reason that you feel the need to be perfect in the first place? And it always goes back to something that happened, in somebody's childhood. And I'm not a therapist. I'm not helping people through trauma. The majority of people that I work with already worked through that, but we're still identifying those roots come from way back. Cause I'll ask people, why do you think you need to be perfect? And they'll be like, well, I just feel it. And they're like putting it on them. And I'm like, no, someone taught you that behavior. You know what I mean? So I think that when I talk to majority of people, like that perfectionism, that need to have things look a certain way or else it won't be good enough is so common. And getting people to realize that that idea that perfection is literally impossible unless you're like a free climber and if you fall you die, like I always like say that, but that's like the only time you need to be perfect, you know what I mean? The trying to be perfect all the time is so exhausting, and the master has failed more times than the student has ever even tried. And so their success leaves clues. So why would you, if you're looking up to people who are successful and you know they failed their way there and they figured it out, why do you, who maybe isn't where you want to be, think that perfect's going to get you there? You know what I mean? It's kind of like helping people realize that, which is hard. And that's why I try to not, my tough love isn't beating them up because they feel perfect. My tough love is stop focusing on the wrong thing. Let's do the uncomfortable work of what your dad, your mom, your teacher told you about what you need to do in order to be perfect. You know what I mean?
Yes. I do know what you mean. It's the uncomfortable stuff because we, obviously as a yoga instructor, we talk about this all the time. The fact that yoga, even as a mindfulness practice, it allows us, and even like last night as I'm teaching a restorative class and I'm like, it's like a beginner class and I'm like commending these people on like being still because I know it's hard because being still for a lot of people equates to exactly what we're talking about. Like it's that discomfort and it's like lack of control comes up because I'm not actively doing something right now. Like I'm not actively like fixing something or planning something or getting ahead of something and doing something. Just sitting in that discomfort of stillness is like a practice that gets us okay with the discomfort. Like if you want to do anything, if you want to get used to anything, if you want to allow something to start to feel safe to you that doesn't feel safe to you, you have to do it. It's going to be uncomfortable. So I understand from that, that's like kind of the parallel of like the tough love, even though, and I like the fact that you bring that up too, because a lot of times when I hear other people or practitioners or coaches or whatever talking about tough love and having a tough love approach, sometimes that tough love approach equates to not a very trauma conscious approach. Mm-hmm. So admittedly, sometimes I'll be like, okay, like I get it. I really do. And there's like this, I don't want to say an old mentality, but like there was and still continues to be this approach that's kind of like a very mindset driven approach that's like, okay, like you just got to keep going. You just got to keep going, and stuff like that. And a lot of it doesn't really take into account the fact that, like you said, a lot of us are struggling because of these blocks, and these blocks are rooted in something. They're just not like, oh, now I see it, right? Oh, I did some yoga and breath work and now I'm a little bit more aware because like you said, like a lot of these people have done a little bit of work on self-awareness on some level. And now I can see it and look at it. And now I can just simply put it down and just keep going on. And it really isn't that easy because it lives in our nervous system. So it's part of working through that. But that's another reason why I think we all need the support system to do that, whether that is a coach or whether it's, you're in therapy or whatever you're doing, or it's just like people who freaking get you, like a community of people, like a circle of people that actually get you, as opposed to someone who might look at you like sideways. Yeah. I'm not really sure how to help you with that. Some group that will just listen, right? We all need support. Yeah. So we were gonna kind of get into a little bit about motivation and self-discipline, because again, this is like so in line with what you do and kind of connecting the dots on this. So all I'm going to say is that in your discussion about targeting blockages, right, and limiting belief systems, which 9 times out of 10, a limiting belief system, again, something someone said to you, something someone of authority taught you at a relatively young age that stuck with you, and now you're living your whole life by it, whether that is in life or in business or in your love life or whatever it is, and you're just living life by this thing, this belief that is limiting you. It's literally limiting you because it has no real foundational truth in reality. It's just based on someone else's perception of their life that they just handed it to you. So now that we have a definition of limiting belief systems, mine absolutely, that like one of the belief systems and things that I absorbed absolutely is perfectionism that gets in the way of my self-discipline and motivation. For example, I'm just giving this as an example, right? Like I will want so desperately to work on 5 or 7 different things, and my perfectionism or my black and white thinking, right? In other words, perfectionism can sometimes translate as I'm either all in on this or I'm not going to do anything. So because if I start a project, it has to be perfect. It has to be executed. It's not even just about the result being perfect. The action needs to be perfect. The execution needs to be perfect. Everything, right? So if I can't put it all into this one thing, then I do nothing. And then what happens is that I lose motivation and I become stagnant. And it happens to me very, very often. So I'm just giving an example of how, right, like motivation, lack of motivation and lack of self-discipline kind of comes in because of that belief system. And then all of a sudden I'm in a state of of pause, to say it nicely.
Yeah. Perfectionism is all or nothing thinking for sure.
Yeah.
That's what I typically help people with, you know. So are
Yeah.
you did I didn't know if you had a question or
No, I was just letting you know, like seeing what came up for you.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, and there are a few things like the biggest piece going back to what you were saying before is the difference between awareness and integration, and most people are at that first step, especially if you're listening to a podcast like this. Most people are past the point of where that, like, you know, they're willing to do the work, you know what I mean? Like you'll have people who like don't even know they're struggling with something, or they're like, well, I'm not sad, so I'm fine, I don't need therapy, I don't need this. And it's like, well, there's so many, you might not be sad, but somebody might say something and it triggers you, that means you need to work on that, you know what I mean? So I think that once people get to the step of awareness, that's where so many people are right now. So many people, it's not a bad thing. Awareness is the first, you can't skip awareness in order to get to integration. So if you're there, that's a good thing. But I think a lot of people are stuck, and these are the kind of people that I help that are in awareness, because they're like, kind of like you were saying, like they look at it, they're like, oh, I see it now. Even if they can identify a little bit more, like, oh, well, I know why I'm hard on myself because my dad was hard on me. Or I know why I struggle with all or nothing thinking because of, you know, this, or fear of failure, fear of success, caring about what other people think. Like those are common things that I help people with. And so the next step, once you're aware that you have all or nothing thinking, that you have perfectionism, and maybe you're even aware where it comes from, it's okay. Now you get the tools, whether it be like, you know, doing inner child work, journaling, meditating, you know, getting a coach, getting a therapist, and not just talking about it, but actually saying, okay, I struggle with perfectionism. I know it doesn't work. I know where it comes from. Here's what I can do to combat that. I'm literally going to have to, you know, instead of doing 7 things a day, do 1. For my all or nothing clients, I get them to buy a puzzle, 1,200 piece puzzle. And you're going to do it every night, but you're going to set a timer for 15 minutes, and you're not allowed to do it for longer than that. And they're like, I
Mm.
want to rip my face off, because they're like, I just want to finish the puzzle. And I'm like, you're going to sit there and you're going to do it, because you're going to realize you're not going to spontaneously combust if you don't do the puzzle. And you're going to feel uncomfortable. But like, whether it be something like that or whatever, you have to actually integrate what you're learning. People love to read, listen to podcasts, read books, but then they don't actually integrate. If you read 15 books last month, which is a lot, but like you read, you know, a bunch of books, but you haven't really integrated it, you've literally just read words on a piece of paper, which again is a good thing. I'd rather you do that than nothing. But if you're wondering why you're stuck or why you've been struggling with the same thing for 10 years, it's because you are aware, but you are not integrating. And integrating is the biggest piece of all of it. Integrating is a lot of what people don't want to do, because then you get into the parts of you where your husband triggers you or your wife triggers you, and you don't want to practice, you know, mindfulness because you want to be right. You don't know, well, that's not fair that they no, that then your ego is getting in the way. You know what I mean? So there's a really kind of taking it from awareness to integration. That's an important piece.
Yeah. And yeah, what was coming up for me too. Yeah. There has to, yeah, like you said, that you starts with awareness. We have to take action. Um, like to integrate what you've learned.
Yeah.
And that action is what gets people. You're right. Like they don't want to take that. For example, if you have to, yeah, if you're triggered by anyone, for example, and you have to now set a boundary, you have to have a potentially uncomfortable conversation, because how do you communicate? Oh, okay, so I was triggered because this person keeps crossing a boundary for me that I have in no way communicated. So now I actually have to finally fucking do that. And it's uncomfortable as hell. So just, yeah, totally agreeing with you, the fact that that's where people get a little bit lost. And yes, I would absolutely want to rip my face off if you told me to do like a couple pieces of a puzzle. Actually, it's so funny that you said that, because my dad got my daughter like a 1,000-piece puzzle, and she's 6, and I'm like, oh, cool. Because now I got to sit here and do this with her, and that's exactly how I would need to do it, because the attention span is about that. We're talking like 6 pieces at night before we go to bed. That's exactly how I would need to do that puzzle, is like a few pieces at a time of 1,000 pieces, which is really a beautiful thing. Way back when, not quite the same thing, but my very first coach that I ever worked with made me cut cold turkey making all my lists, my endless lists of to do, which would include things like, business related, like big items, right? Things like, kind of that are a big deal. And it would also include like, switch the laundry to the dryer. Like it was ridiculous. And if at the end of the day, obviously you have 1,000 things on a list. Is it going to feel good when you only check off 2 out of 1,000 things? It's going to feel shitty. Depends on the person. But for me, it was always like, but in retrospect, first of all, having obviously put that into practice and cut my list making and, planner filling out and all the things that I would procrastinate, like in a way, like all the planning was just another form of procrastinating, because the taking action is where things get messy and imperfect. So, yes, doing that was not pleasant. I felt like, like I would needed a hit. Like I was like, only just write a few freaking things down. Like, oh my God, like dying. But just like anything else, the awareness came from actually putting that into practice. Right now I have the awareness, oh, like I really do depend on it. And now I know why. And once I know why, I can get to the root of like where potentially it comes from. Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, just because I really like to like be open with my own story and my own, why and root of things, right, on this show. And for just so that people have an example of like where this shit comes from, right? For the people who may or may not be in that phase of awareness, right? Like a lot of us grew up in households where it could be like a number of things, like it could be strange relationships, and now there's like things that are related to attachment and, in your relationships and in your life. For example, I grew up in a house of addiction. Like my father had a drinking problem most of his life. And when you live in a family of addiction that includes addiction, everything else that you can control out of the things that cannot be controlled in that arena, everything else that you can control, you will be in complete control of, right? And you will be taught for a young age that everything else has to be perfect, because there's this big, massive side of life that is out of control. So it's just an example, and I like to make sure that I give those, so of how there's a root cause to everything that might not be immediately available, but it's a very big deal to dig in. So whether it is through coaching or with therapy, or maybe just like getting super, again, uncomfortable, but like getting super quiet and like allowing your, maybe it's journaling, maybe it's meditating and actually letting some of your emotions and some of your shit come up when you're in those triggered moments, when you're in that, like, say it's when I am literally sitting here and going, I don't know where to begin, because it's this all or nothing. It's this push and pull. There's no like way for me to take imperfect action. I sit with those feelings. I try to let those emotions come through, and then like start to dig in and ask why. which I'm sure you probably instruct on some level, you know, some type of in some type of way with your clients. But I was going to ask you, so getting back to the matter at hand, since this show is about self-care, right? So we're talking right now about blocks, right? So like what, and that's just one of many of them, right? That you can potentially have, either whether you're trying to make changes into your lifestyle, or either you're trying to make, you know, trying to start a business. So what is one, you know, block that you often help some of your clients with? And is there like a self-care aspect to what you kind of like off what you recommend, right, as the way to kind of get around your blockages when you're trying to make changes in your life?
Yeah. So I I would say it's funny because procrastination is like this big umbrella, and that I have just discovered in my work that a lot of people come to me when it comes to procrastination, because everybody's procrastinating in different ways. Not everybody does, but my clients definitely do. So it's either procrastinating on going after their dreams, procrastinating on just taking care of themselves. Like they don't do their laundry for a really long time, or they procrastinate their workouts. Like it's all this like self-sabotage and procrastination. And so what I've found is, and these are just like the main things, I'm sure there are other ones, but I found that there are about 6 reasons why people procrastinate. And this is when it gets to the blocks. And that would be perfectionism, all or nothing thinking, fear of failure, fear of success, caring about what people think, and then needing to know all the answers before you start. And so a lot of times, again, people are coming to me for procrastination. So I'm going to ask them. I'm really, really good at asking the right questions. I feel like I was just people are gifted like superpowers. My superpower is just knowing how to ask the right questions. And so I'll ask certain questions to figure out, why they're doing that. And then that usually, leads us to finding out like what's underneath that, right? So I would say those 6 are probably the main ones. I would say out of those 6, fear of failure, and unconsciously, there's many people that have a fear of success. Most people, when I first present it to them, are like, "What? Why would I
Mhm.
be afraid of success? I want success." But then they're burnt out, and I'm like, or they saw their parents like working all the time, or they knew family members that had a lot of money but weren't happy, and so they are unconsciously self-sabotaging because they again in their head, they are like, well, if I procrastinate, then I never have to succeed. And then I never have to possibly get responsibility that I can't handle. So I would say fear of failure, fear of success are definitely big ones. Perfectionism is another big one too. But when it comes to my work specifically, self-care is definitely important, but I'm all about, you're probably already aware of what you need to do when it comes to self-care. Again, my clients. Um, Typically I don't work with someone that's like never ever ever in their entire life either journal, therapy, meditation. It's okay if you haven't, but most of my people are. So the self-care, not that it's not important, I make that's kind of like a given, but it's more like, again, we need to make sure that you're just focusing on these things that you need to do to integrate. Again, whether it's inner child work, sitting
Mhm.
with the uncomfortable feelings, like, and then I kind of talk about 2 different things. There's reflective action and there's active action. Reflective action on your blocks is going to be morning routine, journaling, meditating, all of those things that you're going to do for yourself. You're just sitting and like writing, thinking, whatever. Then active action is the blocks that we talked about. When we kind of identify where they came from, I give my clients some exercises that in the moment, when a fear is coming up, when a block is coming up, when they're going to do something and those limiting beliefs pop up, you kind of have to ask, okay, what's the new way of handling this? And then do it anyway, even if it's not your normal behavior, because we need to create a new pattern. But you can't do the active without the reflective first. So I want to make sure that they're doing that. And a lot of times people are coming to me like, I want to take care of myself. I want to work out. I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to do this. And the problem that they have is because they want to do the self-care and they want to do it all. And I'm like, it'd be so great if you worked out and you ate right and you meditated and you did this. But why are we going to try to get you to do all of those things when you're paralyzed and you're procrastinating? Let's just, like, I'll literally take someone who's doing 45 things and I'm like, you're only allowed to do, not like, I always tell them at the end of the day, you can do what you want, but like, you're not allowed to have more than like 2 things in your morning routine right now.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just do that. So my angle in terms of self-care is not that it's not important, because of course it's super important, but it's stop trying to do what Sally on Instagram is doing with her 17-step morning routine, and just find something that works for you. Because once you establish it as a habit and then you stick to it, it's going to be easier to become more consistent. If you try to create a consistent routine that consists of 7 things, it's not going to happen if you haven't been doing it. So let's start with one, then you can add it in, because this is where the perfectionism, all or nothing thinking comes in, even fear of failure, because it's like, well, if I don't do 7 things, then I failed. No, that's not the truth. You know what I mean? And the last piece of this that I help my clients with is what I call the puberty stage of your habits, routines, goals, whatever. There's a 3-step process that not like I've created, but what I've coined in terms of my work is like, there's the puberty, the plateau, and the coast stage. And so the puberty stage is usually like the first like 2 to 4 weeks of you getting through a block, you trying to create a new habit, where it's the puberty stage because it's uncomfortable. It's awkward. It's not a part of your daily routine. It's new to you. You're trying to figure it out. And most people drop off in the puberty stage and they end up in this cycle because they're like, oh, I never remember. And then they don't set reminders. They don't do things that they need to do. So then they kind of end up in this cycle of like, they do it for 2 weeks, but then it's really messy. It's not consistent enough. And it's, this all or nothing thinking. So they give up. And then they're like, oh, I don't feel good. I need to start again. And they end up in that stage. But if you get past the puberty stage, then you get into the plateau stage, where it's actually pretty much a habit. But now you're at, like, let's use working out, for example. Like, it's a habit you remember for the most part. Maybe it's not perfect and you don't want it to be perfect anyway, but like it's there, but you're not going to like see insane results, because now you just need to do it for like months and months and months before you really start to see changes in your body or your mind or your whatever it might be. And a lot of people will drop off at this stage too, because they think that it's a habit now. I finally have it like consistent, and I'm still not seeing results. It's like, you have to be patient. Patience is like a very big thing. That's when it comes to tough love. That's like a big thing that I work with people in. But so once they get past the plateau stage, then they get to the coast stage, where it's a habit. They've actually seen results. And now you have to continue to maintain. A lot of people will work out, they'll get their results. They're like, oh my God, I lost 30 pounds. And then they'll start falling back, and you start to fall back down the hill. So the coast stage is where you want to stay essentially for the rest of your life, and know that it's okay to fall back down a little bit, but as long as you use what you know works, you know what I mean? So that's really what I like to focus on. It doesn't necessarily matter what you're doing, just that you're doing something. I'd rather you tell me that you meditated for 5 minutes one day and 1 minute the next day, and then maybe you skipped one day and then you did 10 minutes the next day and 5 minutes the next day, versus you thinking you want me to tell you that you did like a 7-hour meditation one day. I don't care if you did it one day. I just want you, 0 is better than 1. So
Yeah, it's perfect. I mean, you just like reiterated so much of what we talk about on this show in regards to self-care, because that is the thing. It's also, we have to be really careful how the concept of self-care is depicted to us in culture and media, which is like, I'm just gonna like pamper the shit out of especially for women, like it's a lot of pampering, a lot of like pedicures, manicures, and stuff like that. But that's not real self-care. There's a place for that. Actually, I tend to call it, I have, there's a lot of different categories of self-care, which I try to like organize for people, especially in my coaching business, because there is a place for everything and there's so much available to you, like what you said. And pick 1, maybe 2 things that really support you as the person you are and in the phase of life that you're in, instead of being like, well, I have to start yoga, I have to meditate. And like, the reason that life isn't going my way is because of it's me. It's because I'm not doing this and this and this. Okay, well, what about if those things aren't actually meant to support you right now?
Yeah.
They're supporting someone else. But maybe all you need to do is sleep more. Like, I mean, something so simple instead of like, I need a vacation. Everybody's like, I need a vacation. I need a vacation. It's a bigger conversation to have if you feel like you constantly need a vacation from your own life. It's a larger conversation, about literally like, what is it that we need to like, work together to change on a larger level. But, um, but yeah, maybe it's not a vacation. Maybe you just need a lot more rest. Maybe you need to have a hard conversation with your partner about, you know, e- equal amount of housework, so that you have a chance to take a rest. And that's where things get, I call that ugly self care, because it's not fun. And it's definitely not like a massage or a pedicure. It's like, you got to get out of your own way by being willing to get a little uncomfortable so that in the long run, you can actually advocate for yourself. That's like, so like the concept of self-care that I've been talking about has, again, going back full circle to the beginning of our conversation, it has evolved a lot. And when I talk about it now, it's about self-care is about self-advocacy and self-regulation. Like, this is how we actually, like, the most important form of self-care, whatever is going to do it for you. And of course, we can get specific about what is the best option when you're trying to regulate your nervous system, when you're trying to regulate yourself. You can't be in that place of awareness that we keep talking about. Right? I should say you can be. I think actually you can be in that place of awareness and be dysregulated. A lot of us have been there. But you can't really integrate from a place of dysregulation. So that's where I'm at, right? In my message now is trying to like kind of put all of those pieces together. Like, okay, like here's where we need to start. And before we can even get to like, we're making these massive life shifts, we're quantum leaping our success and everything, and it's just, and patience is another thing that is just like extremely important. It's hard because that same gremlin, I feel, and you can tell me if you agree or if you have a take on this, like that same gremlin that's about perfectionism and that's about like all or nothing type of approach where so many people struggle with. I think it's the same gremlin that tells us that, success means that you do it in a relatively short amount of time, that you like meet your goal in like this, and then if it takes you longer than XYZ, then that wasn't successful. It took you too friggin' long.
Yeah.
Like that type of a mentality. Like, I don't know. I picked that up somewhere along the way.
A lot of it is because of the society that we live in with social media and with our phones. Like we can push a button and get food delivered to our house. We can swipe left or right to date somebody. And so we've been conditioned and we're evolving and it's going to get worse where people just want things right now. We're not used to, and then we see overnight successes with quotations around it for sure, because anybody that you've seen that even somebody who's like gone viral, like on TikTok or something, of course there's like a random like occasion where that like will happen, but people who are either like running a business or doing something like art or music or whatever, they did a million things before that happened, before it ever led up to that point. And I think people don't credit that. And then again, they also, because we're chemically addicted to our phones and you get a dopamine hit every single time you see a video, you get a text message. And so it's not just about like, oh, our mind, we just want things quickly. It's actually becoming an addiction. We
Mhm.
want things because we are searching constantly for the dopamine hit. And so when we're going for goals, we want the dopamine. And when we're going for goals and not achieving them, we're not getting the dopamine. So that's why it's important to set small like measurable goals each day. So if you're working for something, whether it be like working out, like, losing weight or, growing your business, you can't just set these like far off goals. You have to set some, because when you have those small goals and you hit them, you're going to get that dopamine hit. Not that you want to like, be completely consumed by that, but it can be a way to kind of like help with that a little bit. The other thing that I think is important to mention that I also talk a lot about on my social media and with my clients is the reason why there was something you were talking about in terms of um the self-care when it comes to doing all the things, or we want to like have a million things on our list. And then we wonder why it's like not working. It's because our ego, all the answers most of the time are very simple. And our ego wants it to be overcomplicated, because if it's overcomplicated, instead of being like, well, actually, it was really simple and I could have just done it, our ego's like, oh my God, this is so confusing and so hard and I don't know how to do it. So that's why you weren't successful. It's like, no, it's actually very simple. And so if if you let your ego get in the way, it just continues to want you to fixate on the overcomplicated thing, when it's like, it's actually simple. And that's hard on our ego, because then we go, oh wow, we could have just done it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Your ego wants there's so much we could say about that, but it's your ego really wants to be like super important. It's not about like ego is bad, because they're, like it's a part of us, meaning like, so if you think of ego as like the personality that was formed out of all of your experiences that were lived and passed down to you in a way inclusive of those limiting belief systems, um it's still a part of you, even though it sounds bad. It sounds like, the devil over here. And then like your true self or your higher self is like this angel over here. And I feel like we get like a depiction of that from a lot of different sources these days, if you go down that road. But it is a part of you, but it's just it's just like anything else. Like we couldn't walk around like, okay, say you're like in a really spiritual realm, right? And you're like, I'm aspiring to just live as my highest self. And I am just like elevating to this like other dimension, right? Like, or whatever it is. I can't live like that. I live on Earth in the 3D dimension. Like, this is where I live. This is where I have children. Like I need to be here. I need to be here now. And then, so in other words, just clarifying, right? Like just putting that out there. We're not trying to like, divide, and you're not trying to squash like a part of you. Everything is a part of you. And I think once you start to compartmentalize right now, like compartmentalize parts of yourself and like point fingers at what's good and what's bad, then we have problems. But it's one of those things where, yeah, it's awareness. Like you just have to notice. And, back to the patience aspect, like the only way that you can actually notice any of this is by slowing down, and obviously the yogi in me has to like continually come back to that. Like the fact that like, I mean, please, I am, and, I continue to be a pretty like, like high achieving woman, my background is like, go to college, go get the corporate career, make that fucking money, go, support yourself, security, financial security, da, 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 da. Like, it is very much in that realm. So there's a lot of those stories that I constantly have to like play with and become aware of, because it's a matter of that slowing down and that constant like masculine energy of like doing and going, and productivity being like the thing that, gives us value and all of this. It's very hard if you lived in that, like if you're listening to this and you're like, slowing down, that's my problem, that's the biggest thing. It's not a problem. It is hard. It's fucking hard in the world we live in. It's not easy. But like you've mentioned before, it's about building new patterns. It's the same way. And like you can go into the science of it. Like if we have a neuro pathway that is associated with something that we have done a million times over and over and over again, even if you can think about it, you come downstairs after waking up in the morning and you make yourself a cup of coffee. And now you're trying to, quitting coffee or any kind of substance is a larger conversation. And that's like hard to do as it is. But like also you have a neural pathway that tells you that that's what you do every single day. And so a thought pattern is the same as a physical pattern. Like you come downstairs, you do this physically with your body. A thought pattern is the same. It's so friggin' ingrained in you. So you have to think about having to build a new one. Like it starts out with my therapist tells me this all the time and I love it. It's like, it starts off as this little weakling and it's so weak and it's tiny and you have to nurture it and you have to keep going back to it until it grows into something. All of that, think about that. That is not easy. It's not easy. But why? Another reason we have to give ourselves time. It does not have, like, none of this happens overnight.
Yeah. And I just think that people it goes back to like what I'm talking about, the puberty stage. People just have to practice patience. If you're not patient, that's okay. But with anything else, then again, that's with all of my work. It's like, instead of just trying to be patient, let's find out why it's so hard for you to do that, because it's going to be very different for everybody else. Because sometimes it's a worth thing, that if I don't go fast enough, I'm not worthy enough. And if we can figure out, okay, where does that come from? Then it'll become easier for you to be patient versus you just trying to muscle your way. And most people are trying to muscle their way through everything. It's just not going to.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. 100%. Do you meditate? You mentioned that a few times.
Yeah, pretty much, definitely at least 5 days a week. I'm like, the weekends are kind of like, depends on how I'm feeling, but whether it's meditation, visualization, I have ADHD and other things that I struggle with. So just meditating outside of like all the known benefits, or like the like the thinking and the this and the that, just the lowering your heart rate and wanting to be a healthy person, and like putting yourself from sympathetic to parasympathetic state, I will always do that. And I think this is a really good way to practice patience. And a lot of people think they need to be mindless, but it's just about being mindful. The thoughts are a part of meditation. So if you stop trying to perfect every single thing, and even meditation, then it'll be easier, because it doesn't have to look a certain way.
Yeah. 100%. I tell people all the time, I'm like, I know you hear a lot about turning your brain off or quieting the mind, even quieting. I guess I'm a little bit more comfortable with, but like I get some of my best ideas when I'm in meditation. And yeah, I also get like, the little gremlin that comes in and tells me I need to go do the laundry or whatever the fuck it is. And that's fine too. I can like thank that thought lovingly, put it on a shelf. Thank you so much for the reminder. But in other words, if you're not turning your brain off, again, like, we're given this like way of doing it, that it has to be this way. But yeah, even if it's not that, right, by any means of like, yes, dropping in, getting into your body, being present, getting into the parasympathetic so that we can rest and digest. How can we be patient if we're like trying to fight or flight? Like if we're always in that anxious state, can't
Yeah.
be patient with anything.
Yeah.
I want to thank you. This has been like a really amazing conversation. I was really looking forward to talking with you.
Thank you.
Tell us where we can find you if some of our listeners want to hook up with you and get
Yeah.
some content.
So of course I had to get married and have a super long last name now, and someone stole my Instagram that I wanted to use. So my name is kind of long, but it's Alexis Renee McCloskey. So AlexisRenee McCloskey. And so that's where you can find me. I'm that on Instagram. I have all of the links for anything else in my bio, but I'm like mainly on Instagram. Instagram has been my jam for forever. Whether you want to DM me there, I answer all my DMs. I'm always hanging out there. So if you want to communicate, you can look at, like I said, the link in my bio. But honestly, anything you need from me, I'm working on getting my new website done. So I don't have that up right now. But anytime anybody asks me to see anything, I'm like, I have all the things on my highlights on my Instagram. You can find them honestly easier than you'd be able to find on a website. So yeah, you can just find me on Instagram. That's where I live and breathe. So
It is an easy place. And I do recommend going and checking out Alexis's Instagram because your content is fantastic. You're great on Reels. You're getting like really very poignant and important points across in a way that keeps me coming back and engaged, and just think it's awesome. And I want to thank you again. So if you're listening and you loved this, see if you can roll over to YouTube and give us a subscribe. Maybe you can send a review through on your podcast platform, like, share, do all the things. Thank you again, Alexis. It's been amazing. And we're to